The Hugh Hewitt Show begins in 5 seconds.
Third person spreads to South Korea and more Chinese cities. This is the headline in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Byline of Chow Deng, filed at 1:39 a.m. A newly identified virus originating in central China has spread to South Korea, killed a third person in China, and reached at least 3 more population centers within the country, as the number of live cases has more than tripled. A major escalation in the outbreak of the pneumonia-like disease. South Korean authorities confirmed Monday that a 35-year-old Chinese woman who had flown into the country from the Chinese city of Wuhan had contracted the coronavirus, part of a class of pathogens that can cause illnesses ranging from the common cold to the deadly severe acute respiratory system, or SARS. The virus has also reached China's capital, Beijing, in the north of the country, where 2 cases were identified, local authorities said. Health authorities in the southern metropolis of Shenzhen, on the border with Hong Kong, also reported 1 confirmed case of the coronavirus Monday and 8 suspected cases there. Meantime, 5 suspected cases were reported by health authorities in coastal Zhejiang province, just south of Shanghai on the country's east coast, in the cities of Wenzhou, Zhoushan, Taizhou, and Hangzhou. The sudden spread of the disease raises fresh concerns as tens of millions of Chinese citizens prepare to travel, many of them to their hometowns for the annual Lunar New Year holiday. It is also likely to spark questions over the transparency of disclosures by Chinese health authorities. Now, I want you to write down January 20th, 2020. 1/20/2020. That's the first day I led a show with a report on coronavirus. Now, if past is prologue, we know that the Ebola crisis of a few years back suggests that modern travel will allow coronavirus to get to the United States. We don't know when. It could be tomorrow. And so I hope somebody at the White House and HHS is calling up Ronald Klain, who is Vice President Biden's campaign manager. And I know he's a Dem, real smart Dem. He's a Dem, but he was also the Ebola point guy for President Obama. And when it comes to breakout of virus, and I go back to the 1920 Spanish flu, there's a book out on that George W. Bush used to carry around under his arm when Ebola first became an international problem. You don't want to mess around. You just want to be prepared. And so I would hope that every single person, regardless R&D, pays attention to this story. There are a lot of other stories out there this morning, but coronavirus is the one that in the world should be looking. Meanwhile, the Journal also reports that the U.S. is maintaining pressure on Iran, even as tensions cool. Iran is backing away. The flop that is impeachment really cannot survive. I don't think it can survive 2 weeks. I read the entire, if you watched Meet the Press yesterday, you saw me say very firmly and without reservation or any kind of hesitation. I read the whole House manager's trial brief and their statement of material facts, SMF. Read it all on Saturday night because I was doing Meet the Press yesterday. There is not an impeachable offense. There is no offense stated here. Their argument, condensed, is that Donald Trump tried to persuade and oblige by the withholding of aid Ukraine so that he could impact the 2020 election. That's what they say. In fact, their evidence, statement of material fact number 73 on page 25 of the second submission says, quotes a Volok, Ambassador Volker, text to Yarmuk, the right arm of Zelensky, saying, the president's got a promise to look into 2016. That's what this was all about. It was about 2016. It goes back to the Politico story of January 11th, 2017, before the inauguration of Donald Trump, where Politico's investigation revealed Ukraine meddled in the election. Not in the same way Russia did. Russia was by far the bigger perpetrator, but Donald Trump wanted to get to the bottom of what did they do in 2016 and why. And Hunter Biden may or may not be a part of that, but it is not close to an impeachable offense for the President of the United States to investigate attacks on our election or the attempts of foreign governments, both Russian and Ukrainian, or any other foreign government, to influence our election. It's a nothing burger. And I do not believe for a moment, not one moment, that you have to allow anybody at all any time to get up there and rant about the president. The House managers get 24 hours. That's what the Senate rules provided for Bill Clinton. And it's Mitch McConnell's view, so it is reported, that he wants them to do it in 2 days of 12-hour presentations. Those poor senators, they have to sit there for those 12 hours of Schiff, Nadler, and Five. That's the law firm they've sent over, Schiff, Nadler, and Five. Five unknown names, but it's Schiff and Nadler. And they get 12 hours each day for 2 days, according to the draft that people most recently saw. And I suspect very much that at the end of that, the president's team may just rest. They may just rest. They may say, there's nothing here. This is a political hatchet job, and we're not playing. Now, I did want to say that over at the New York Times, they tried to create some clicks by announcing they would endorse early for the Democratic nomination. Get everyone to pay attention. Click, 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 click. 7 hours ago, the New York Times, and honestly, I don't know if this matters to anybody in the world outside of the New York Times editorial board. But I'm telling you about it, so maybe it does. In a break with convention, the editorial board has chosen to endorse two separate Democratic candidates for president, Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. That's what they did. That's a stunt. That's not an endorsement. It's a stunt. Now, I got a chance yesterday to talk about who I'm voting for, and I would like to, I'd like to give you all a chance to know about that. And so if we can find the clip on Meet the Press where Chuck asked me what I thought about the Democrat fight. Chuck Todd asked me about what about the fight between Bernie and Elizabeth. And here's what I said.
You know, what we found in our reporting.
Hoping for is a conservative here that wants to see the Democrats lose. This split here, because this split might actually help Biden, who might be the tougher foe.
I thought the winner of the split was Pete Buttigieg, because either the Warren voter or the Sanders voter who was turned off, they're not going to go to Joe Biden. They've already committed to a progressive. I can tell you one thing. Because Virginia allows early voting, and because I don't know where NBC or Salem will have me on March 3rd, I'm voting this week. And because it's Virginia, I get to vote in the Democratic primary. I'm voting for Bernie Sanders, and I think a lot of people will because he's authentic.
You're going to do calculated voting?
No, it's not. It's not. It's because I think he's authentic.
Yeah, you're going to vote for Bernie Sanders against Donald Trump?
No, okay. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. But I want a. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump in the general. I'm telling you that right now, but I am also going to vote for Bernie this week. Early voting in the primary began on Thursday, January 16th in Virginia. And so I just don't believe that we should have a fake socialist up. We ought to have a real socialist. They all kind of believe in crazy redistributionist policies that will kill the economic growth that we are experiencing. All six of the seven of the remaining Democrats, they all believe in it. But Bernie believes in it the most. And he's most unafraid to say it's going to cost $30 billion for climate change and $30 billion here and $30 billion there every year. So I say, let's get clarity in November. Vote for Bernie. Some left-wingers, Elizabeth Warren people, were upset with me yesterday. But I mean, really, she's a fake socialist. Bernie's the real deal. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the After Show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
The Hugh Hewitt Show. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break. 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening today. As I said, as I Meet the Press yesterday, let's run through the about the 4 minutes that I had to say. Cut number one, Hugh on Meet the Press.
Constitution. Now, Hugh, you're a lawyer. Technically, this sentence is not accurate. I mean, the House impeached. Whether you may not like what they did, but it is it's constitutionally valid. You just may not like what they did.
I think they were trying to convey exactly that. I read last night the House manager's trial memorandum and their entire statement of material facts. I do not believe they have presented a case that rises to the level of an offense that is impeachable, much less any offense at all. In fact, I looked at, with a little bit of stunned amazement, at material allegation 73, which is on page 25 of the second submission, in which they contradict their own allegation, which is at the beginning, the president was attempting to influence the 2020 election. They cite in their own statement of material facts, it was about the 2016 election, a Volcker to Yermak text. So I spent a lot of time on this last night. I don't think we're going to get the witnesses now. They do not have a case, and on Article 2, I think it is absolutely silly. There was no offense, no impeachable offense. Cut number two yesterday.
Hugh, why isn't there more anger at Rudy? I'm surprised there isn't, because do you think we'd be here without Rudy Giuliani?
No, but I also believe there's no much anger at Rudy because not anyone on my side of the aisle believed an impeachable offense occurred. And I can't stress this enough, and you're onto it with your question about Article 2. This is about future presidents, not just President Trump. Not only do I think he did not commit an impeachable offense or any offense, I'm also concerned that this rushed job, especially on Article 2, is a horrible precedent for future presidents. And when the issue of witnesses comes before the Senate this week or next, I think a lot of Democrats may be tempted to vote on behalf of future presidents. And cut number three.
You know, what we found in our reporting is that the guardrails are gone. The trajectory of this presidency is escalating towards a presidency of one. More chaos, less discipline in decision-making. The people who tried to hem him in, they're out. He drove them out of the room, and he has mostly a lot of people around him who view themselves and their mission as telling him yes.
Is there anybody left? Not a single person left that tries to restrain?
You know, the people in power left, like Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, they see their job as trying to get the president to a yes, of executing what he wants done in a way that they can defend publicly and in a way that is somewhat legal, but they're not trying to challenge him. They're trying to execute his orders and placate his conspiracies to some degree.
I have to disagree. You had Robert O'Brien on last week, Secretary Pompeo the week before. These are strong individuals who will tell the president no when they think he is doing something wrong. I completely reject the idea that Team 3, which this is somehow less able to tell the president hard facts. In fact, I think Team 3 is the best team he's had.
But Hugh, what about the part where Mick Mulvaney agrees to withhold the aid, which turns out to be against the law, the aid to Ukraine?
I don't know that it is against the law. I don't believe that to be the case. I don't think they made that case in the House Manager's brief.
Well, the Government Accountability believes that it was against the
GAO
law.
does. It's an arm of Congress, but I do not believe that has been shown in the manager's brief. I stopped there for a minute. Now, the first person was Carol from the Washington Post. Second was Donna, the congresswoman from, no longer, former congresswoman from Maryland. It has not at all been proven, and it is not part of the House manager's case, that it was illegal, that it broke the law to put the hold on the Ukrainian aid. That there was a hold, I do not doubt. It just hasn't been shown to be a crime. And I'm completely right. And they don't know what to say. Okay, cut number 4.
Hoping for is a conservative here that wants to see the Democrats lose. This split here, because this split might actually help Biden, who might be the tougher foe.
I thought the winner of the split was Pete Buttigieg, because either the Warren voter or the Sanders voter who is turned off, they're not going to go to Joe Biden. They've already committed to a progressive. I can tell you one thing, because Virginia allows early voting and because I don't know where NBC or Salem will have me on March 3rd, I'm voting this week. And because it's Virginia, I get to vote in the Democratic primary. I'm voting for Bernie Sanders, and I think a lot of people will because he's authentic.
You're going to do calculated voting?
No, it's not. It's because I think he's authentic.
Yeah, you're going to vote for Bernie Sanders against Donald Trump?
No, okay. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, but I want a. And then cut number 5.
Hugh, all of these books do have one thing in common. The president doesn't seem to know the story of America as well as perhaps other presidents have. Does that bother you?
I don't agree with that. I think he has an intuition that is manifest at the rallies that he knows, especially the white working class. There's another great book out. I'm going to read A Very Stable Genius, but Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wadoon have a book out called Tightrope about what has happened to working white America, and it's been a disaster. And I think he speaks to that and intuitively. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
And therefore to the New York Times editorial board.
Well, luckily, Bernie got my vote yesterday, so that offsets all that. But let's talk a little bit about a couple of other issues that are in the news.
Wait. I can't. On behalf of the listeners, I can't let that go. Did you really strategically vote that way?
Well, I will this week. I did not vote on Friday, which was the first day for open absentee voting.
But you're gonna.
Absolutely.
As a reporter, I just have to ask you, what's your thought bubble about that? Why?
Because there's one authentic socialist. I think they're all tending way to the left, but the authentic socialist who will put the clear choice between a socialist economy and a free market economy before the voters of America so they can forever dispel that this country is a socialist country is Bernie. I think Bernie will lose in a landslide, but he will lose having articulated authentic socialism, authentic Green New Deal, authentic one universal health care, one system. He's the real deal. And I want that totally repudiated. I don't want some 30%er like Elizabeth Warren or 10%er like Amy Klobuchar. I want the 100%er like Bernie.
Hugh Hewitt, the purists, love it. So of the 4 or 5 that we could say are still viable, let's say 5, Bernie, you think would be the easiest for the president?
No. I think Elizabeth Warren's easier to vote because she actually said she would take away union members' health care, and Bernie has made an exception for that. She can't win Michigan. She can't win Wisconsin. She can't win Pennsylvania because she said Medicare for all and no exception for union health care. She's done. She's toast. So she's the easiest. If I was voting strategically, I'd vote for her.
And you think that you need... Wait. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. You think you need one of the 3 or 2 of the 3, assuming you get Florida and Iowa?
I think one of the 3. That Dems have to win all 3 of the 3, unless Arizona flips, and I'm unsure on the map. But I don't think Arizona's going to flip. Doug Ducey won by 20 points. It was just an odd campaign. I think Martha McSally's going to win again. But let me get to impeachment, Mike Allen. I also said on Meet the Press yesterday, before I told people I was voting for Bernie and got flamed by Elizabeth Sanders people online, that I read the whole thing on Saturday night, the trial brief, the statement of material facts. There's no there. They don't have a case. I would move to dismiss. I don't know what the rules are going to look like. I know that the only thing Mitch McConnell has said is we'll cross the witness bridge when we get to the witness bridge. But certainly we're not only going to call Democratic witnesses. That's all he said. What do you think is the state of play on this? Because it's really, really weak. Did we lose you? Did you fall over, Mike?
No. So the Axios reporting is that the Senate will cross the witness bridge in sneak peek. Elena Treen and Jonathan Swan reporting that the aides on both sides do expect a witness vote. But here's which, of course, has vulnerable Senate Republicans worried. A great quote that a Senate Republican aide gave to Elena Treen in talking about the fact that they were just they're sort of coming to grips with the inevitability of witness votes. The Republican Senate aide told Elena Treen the Democratic amendments that will be offered in the beginning will be designed to screw us. Like, how can we cut these to look like an ad? So real trepidation about that, Hugh. And then second, I think, the most fascinating piece of reporting over the weekend from Jonathan Swan and Weena Treen. The Trump impeachment strategy, what's the card that Trump is going to play with these Senate Republicans to try to keep witnesses out? National security. The president's men and women are going to argue that these witnesses are protecting national security and that new witnesses would cause that information to be exposed. So that's a way to give nervous Republicans, which is the perfect word, nervous Republicans, something to latch onto.
You know, I think they're overthinking this. I think what they need to do is adopt a reciprocity rule for witnesses, meaning they come in flights of four. If prosecutors want a witness, defense get not only a witness, but they also get a right to call one, and then the prosecutor get a right to call one. So it's 4, 8, 12, 16. And we'll adopt that in theory, but before we have any witnesses, knowing we'll have at least 4, we're going to have a vote as to whether or not to proceed if they've made a de minimis showing, a summary judgment motion, in other words, because there is no there. And, I think even I heard around town, they know Article 2 is nonsense. Everybody knows Article 2 is nonsense. But I don't think they made Article 1, and I would direct you to, when you're off the phone, Statement of Material Facts number 73 on page 25 of the second submission. They're trying to argue the president was messing around with the 2020 election, but the House managers included in their own Statement of Material Facts the key telegram or text from Volker to Yermak, which is, we need an investigation into 2016, which no one thinks is impeachable. I just think they blew it. But then again, the House has not been the reservoir of great legal maneuvering for a long time.
What do you think of the read of the briefs that came out Saturday? The Democratic brief, 100-some pages, 300-some footnotes. The Trump response, 6 pages, 7 if you count a blank cover page. The sweeping, the breadth, the breadth and brevity of the Trump arguments. You think that speaks to confidence, or how do you read the difference in style? Since you read the whole thing, how do you read the difference in style of the two documents?
I think the president's lawyers were speaking directly to Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and any other senator who might be considering witnesses. They are saying this is about future presidents, not just this presidency. You cannot allow this week of a case to go forward. It's an assault on Article 2 by Article 1 by the House, and you are supposed to stop this. Otherwise, we're going to be, I am thinking about future presidents here, Mike, because there's just no way he's going to be removed, right? There's just no way this is even going to be a story come next month, much less next November. Too much is going to happen. But I do think it is a damning precedent for future presidents if the House can push partisan impeachments through. It's never happened before, and I think their brevity telegraphs that they'll have Ken Starr stand up and talk about that, maybe Rob Ray. I don't know that Pat Cipollone will make that argument. I don't know that Jay Sekulow will be able to resist making that argument, but I do believe their argument ought to be all about the future, not about the present. What, do you expect that?
So I think that they're making their final decisions about that, and very difficult to read these. But I can tell you our reporting is showing that set up very much like that. One item I was just stalling here because I was just looking for a great quote that was in Sneak Peek. So people heard, Ken Starr, Dershowitz, Pat Cipollone, I know all those people. But wait, not everybody knows Robert Ray, right? And so that was of the announced top members of the team. People have seen Pam Bondi on Fox. A great moment on weekend TV. Robert Ray was on with Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo. Swan and Elena picked up on this in Sneak Peek. And Robert Ray says to Maria Bartiromo on Fox, he says, on a personal note, thank you very much for all the appearances going back now many months. He says, if not for you, I don't know I would have come to the president's attention. So once again, the Fox effect.
Okay,
great moment, right?
Last bit of reporting for you. One of my buddies in the Senate told me they think that Romney and Collins have already decided to back witnesses, but Murkowski's on the fence. But that they may have the nightmare scenario coming up. It's not clear there's a fourth vote for witnesses, which is if you get 3 Republicans, that's an evenly divided Senate, meaning it's up to the Chief Justice to rule. Because the vice president is not a member of the Senate. He doesn't get to vote on that. At least that's my understanding, and it's also the understanding of my colleague or my friend. And so what do you think Roberts does at that point? Because his predecessor and friend, Chief Justice Rehnquist, said about the Clinton impeachment, I did very little and I did it very well. I think that's what John Roberts wants to do.
What you're saying there is congruent with our reporting, which is that senators will almost certainly get to vote on whether or not to call witnesses when the resolution laying out the rules of the trial is presented tomorrow. Axios expects it to mandate that senators can take up or down votes on calling for witnesses and documents.
Is it a one-time vote, though? Have you guys taken a peek at the rules?
There is one lawyer on this call, Hugh Hewitt, and it ain't me. It's the
all right. Well, we will look.
The person who earlier was throwing out de minimis.
I know. De minimis is what it was. They did not meet the de minimis threshold. Mike Allen, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Allen. Get your Axios AM every morning. And now tell you myrelieffactor.com. There it is. It's so cold in D.C. I cannot tell you how cold it is. It's not below freezing, but I've gotten wimpy since living in California for 30 years. There's my lukewarm coffee and myrelieffactor.com. It's sort of my preventative medicine for I do the old slip and fall on 17th Street on the subway gate. My shoulder's a little bit better. Had PT 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and ouch, but it does make it better. However, it is so cold that everything is frozen slippery. And so people fall down. If you're going to fall down, at least be taking Relief Factor before you fall down. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. These are the 4 natural supplements that provide temporary support for the relief of minor aches and pains. Now, it's a supplement, right? It's not supposed to replace your regular meds. If you're taking regular meds, don't stop taking them. But do start taking care of yourself with that which nature has provided, perfectly scientifically calibrated by ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. Selena Zito is next, America. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Or attack or whatever. I mean, those MAGA hats were everywhere in the farm show, which is the largest indoor farm show in the country. Over 500,000 people walked through that door in the week that it was in a session, if you will.
Tell people where Pennsylvania's farm show is.
Pennsylvania's farm show is in Harrisburg. It was its 104th year. There's over 12,000 exhibits. I got to hold a baby pig, which was awesome. They had a birthing center where you could see calves giving birth to cows. I mean, to their
cows
calves.
Giving birth to calves. Yes. The other way around would have been something to see. It might have made the news.
Okay, too much coffee this morning.
Yep.
But it's great. It's what's really, really great is you understand how much agriculture is still an incredibly dominant part of our economy, not just in our food, but also in our fuel. Just think about how many how much shale has sort of had an impact because a lot of those farms have shale platforms on their property, which doesn't impact them, at all. They're very non-intrusive. So it's a really great learning experience.
I want to read a paragraph from the column that Selena has over at Washington Examiner. The Pennsylvania Farm Show is a celebration of food, fuel, life, milkshakes, hot flaky potato donuts, double fried fresh mozzarella cubes, hard work, conservation, and a way of life that is not often understood by outsiders. Now, the great-great-grandfather in my family had the farm up in Saybrook after working in the mines in Pennsylvania, so there's a little bit of the farming gene in me, although I'd cut my hand off if I got near a plow. I am curious, if you had to guess about a percentage of people who had a visible expression of support for Trump at the Pennsylvania Farm Show, what would that percentage be?
99%, probably. 99%.
Not a visible, really? Wearing a MAGA hat?
Oh, okay. 70.
Wow.
Yeah, there's been a lot of these very small stories about farmers being disappointed or unhappy with Trump. Those are probably people that never supported him, and that's fine. But unfortunately, our profession tends to make them the headline, the norm. It's not the norm. I even talk to rural Democrats who don't particularly care for him, but are happy with the direction that he's taking trade. Here's the thing people don't get about farmers. Farmers look at 5 years down the road. They don't look in the immediate. That's why that's how they've had to live their lives in terms of, understanding what crops to put in, how to take care of their soil. So when there's an immediate problem in politics, they don't say, oh, this is it, I'm done. They say, well, how's this going to impact me in 5 years?
Agreed. Now, I got to quickly get your reaction to the New York Times stunt. They could not. Noah Rothman calls it incredible cowardice. They couldn't find. They headlined. They were going to endorse. They're going to endorse their big reveal. They didn't endorse. They said, "Oh, no. Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, top two Democrat." That's not an endorsement.
It's also insulting to women. Here's why. They're saying we're just going to pick the woman because they're a woman. They're essentially saying that, and so they picked the only two women left on the stage. It's absolutely ridiculous and insulting. Pick one person. People are big enough to handle that.
Yeah.
And what stuns me is how much our profession is really trying to uplift Elizabeth Warren, not understanding how horribly, not only would she do in your home state of Ohio, but how horribly she would do in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania at this point counts more than Ohio in being a harbinger of understanding who would win the electoral
yesterday when I told people I get to vote this week, early voting, early absentee in Virginia, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. It's an open primary. And Todd asked me, is that calculated? I said, no. And I didn't add it. I didn't have enough time. If I wanted to pick the weakest Democrat, it would be Elizabeth Warren. I'm voting because I want an authentic socialist. I want the real deal. And Bernie might be strongest of them all other than Bloomberg in my view. But Elizabeth Warren is just not going to win. She's a loser.
She's absolutely not going to win. And whether you like or don't like Bernie Sanders' position on anything, he has always been who he's been, and he's very authentic.
That's why I'm voting for him. Yep. And
that makes sense.
Yep.
It makes logical sense.
I want every Republican who can vote in a Democratic primary. It's your right. It's the law. I'm exercising my franchise. Join me. Become a Bernie bro through Milwaukee. Selena Zito, always a pleasure. Follow her on Twitter at Selena Zito. That way you'll get every column she writes on real time. And don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings from inside a very cold beltway. It is Martin Luther King Day. We honor the great pastor and civil rights leader with recalling one of his most famous addresses.
That one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state in every city. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
That was Martin Luther King on August 28th, 1963. It was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And I think one of he gave many great addresses. I think that's really the best. And I defy anyone not to get a chill when you hear that, even though it's 56 and a half years ago, right? 56 and a half years ago, and still it resonates. That's why we pause today and honor Dr. King. The headlines this morning from China, very bad news. The coronavirus has killed its third victim. It has spread to South Korea and more large Chinese cities. It's in Beijing and Shanghai. Like SARS, it presents in a variety of different ways. It's deadly. And if I were in the Trump White House, if I was Alex Azar, the Secretary of HHS, I would call up Ronald Klain. Now, Ronald Klain is not on my team. He's a Democrat. He's rooting for Joe Biden. He may even be mad at me because I said yesterday I Meet the Press I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. But Ron is smart about this stuff. He was the point guy on Ebola. And when it gets to the United States, and you know what? It's going to get here. There are too many Chinese on too many airplanes, and it's a virus that does not present and that sleeps, and we don't know how to look for it. We got to throw up all of our SARS testing and do all that stuff. When it gets here, the United States has to react quickly and take those people who are positive for it, get them treatment, and get them isolated. And the guy who laid that all out once is Ron Klain. So call him up. This is a partisan issue. This is a public health issue. Just call him up and ask him to come over. Okay, Lindsey Graham on Fox News yesterday with Chris Wallace, cut number 10.
If we call one witness, we're going to call all the witnesses. There's not going to be a process where the Democrats get their witnesses and the president gets shut out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to vote against calling the 4 witnesses requested by Senator Schumer. They're all covered by executive privilege. They're part of the national security team of the president. They could have been called in the House. They chose not to. Apparently, they don't need them to make their case. Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the whistleblower, we can look at those allegations of misconduct outside of impeachment. I want this trial to get over with as quick as possible. I want the people of the United States to pick the next president, not a court of impeachment. And I'd like to be spending my time working on prescription drugs and national security issues instead of this.
Okay. He went on to say this, cut number 11.
You did not allow him to call any witnesses. He could not have a lawyer present during the House Intel Committee. This has been a partisan railroad job, and you're asking for fairness in Senate. You violated every norm of what we do. It took 5 years for Starr to look at Clinton. Mueller looked at Trump for almost 2 years, and you took 48 days. So here's what I would say. The sooner this is over, the better for the country. We can get back to do the business of the American people and do things that really matter to them. I've been very consistent. I supported Mueller. I trusted him to be fair. This has been a political hit job. This is political revenge. And what they're doing to the presidency is a danger to the institution itself.
He's right. Cut number 12, more Lindsey Graham on with Chris Wallace.
It'd be nice to have a lawyer present. It'd be nice to request witnesses. I guarantee you, he'll get a better deal in the House than Senate did in the House. But his mood is to go to the State of the Union with this behind him and talk about what he wants to do for the next rest of 2020 and what he wants to do for the next 4 years. He is very much comfortable with the idea this is going to turn out well for him. He believes politically this has helped him. He thinks it's a threat to the presidency. The one thing he talks to me constantly about is what does the next president do after this if this is successful? He does not want to legitimize attack on the presidency, and that's my number one goal, is to do this trial in a fashion that no House, Republican or Democrat, ever again will do what this House did.
I agree 100%. 100%. That's what I said on Meet the Press. It's a sham. It's a sideshow. It ought to be thrown out. There shouldn't be any witnesses because they did not have a de minimis showing of an impeachable offense in their trial memorandum. Wasn't there. Just wasn't there. They couldn't make the argument. And not having made the argument, it ought to be dismissed. But we'll see what the rules call for, and we'll see what happens. You'll find about breaking news here whenever it happens. I'll be right back, America, on this Monday edition on Martin Luther King Day of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Goldman Sachs, gold could surge past $1,600 an ounce within the next year or so. Wealthiest people have a plan for inflation and instability, a backup. It's called diversity, especially during an election year. What's your plan? Look into diversifying a portion of your savings into an IRA in precious metals. Why the IRA? Of course, it's a tax benefit. Request a free info kit on converting your eligible IRA or 401k into a precious metals IRA at hughgold.com. Have that conversation with Birch Gold. Birch Gold Group, longtime sponsor of the show. There's no obligation. When I buy gold, I buy it from Birch Gold Group. Countless 5-star reviews, A+ rating with Better Business Bureau. You can go to hughgold.com or call 800-434-GOLD. That's 800-434-GOLD. On Friday, the Dow was up 50, the NASDAQ was up 31, and the S&P was down 12. The markets are closed today for Martin Luther King holiday, but there's still some activity on the futures market, which shows everything a little bit red. Let's look abroad, though. Japan was up 0.18%. Hong Kong down 0.9%. Almost 1% off. That's telling me what you ought to know is that coronavirus is not a good thing for the market. Light crude is at $58.96, and gold is just a touch off at $1,559.70. Still a great entry point. Time to diversify. Birch Gold Group is open today. You go to hughgold.com. Donald Trump was at the farmers yesterday, talking to the farmers. Get a little bit of his Farm Bureau speech from yesterday, cut number 14.
If you can't make the right deal, you got to walk. It's true. So we walked a lot, and we always got called back. Let's do it the way you want. On behalf of every American worker and family, thank you for standing strong for America. Thank you very much to the farmers and ranchers for standing with me, for saying the president is right. Yes, it's tough right now, but the president is doing the right thing. Thank you. More than anything else, it proved to me that farmers love America, and I just want to tell you that America loves our farmers. Thank you. Under the deal, China has agreed to spend many billions of dollars on American services and energy and manufactured goods. China has made substantial commitments regarding the protection of American ideas, trade secrets, patents, and trademarks. China has also pledged firm action to confront pirated and counterfeit goods. Most important of all, the deal is enforceable, very, very powerfully enforceable. In fact, it was probably the thing that we negotiated the most. And rest assured, we will vigorously enforce its terms. Hopefully, we won't have to. Hopefully, it'll go just as we anticipate. In a matter of days, we will achieve another tremendous victory for the American agricultural businesses when I signed the USMCA into law. So we just passed it in the Senate, and it was a wonderful vote, and I sign it very soon. It's being prepared now, beautifully prepared. I'm going to Europe to talk to world leaders and to talk to business people about coming.
Very quickly, cut number 15 as well, Donald Trump on standing strong, the farmers for standing strong.
Sad to say that, but you have a great new governor, right, Phil? But we were talking about, he says, you got to do what you got to do. If you can't make the right deal, you got to walk. It's true. So we walked a lot, and we always got called back. Let's do it the way you want. On behalf of every American worker and family, thank you for standing strong for America. Thank you very much to the farmers and ranchers for standing with me, for saying the president is right. Yes, it's tough right now, but the president is doing the right thing.
He's got an 83% approval rating among farmers and ranchers, according to the Farm Bureau poll. Donald Trump owns rural America's vote. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Matthew Continenti is with the Washington Free Beacon. He's one of the very best columnists available in America. He's also, like me, the occasional designated punching bag on Meet the Press. I always like watching you, Matt. You do it like I do it, which is just keep smiling and get your point across. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. Thanks for having me. You're absolutely right. Just kind of keep a straight face and you'll survive.
You'll survive, because Chuck runs a fair game, even if everyone around you is losing their heads. Chuck will give you your at-bats. Matt, I want to talk to you about impeachment. I have read from cover to cover the trial manager's brief on Saturday night, and then I read their statement of material facts. I don't think they meet a de minimis standard for an impeachable offense. Have you had a chance to read it yet? And if so, what do you think?
Well, let's say I've read in it, and what I saw in it is very reminiscent of the arguments that they made, of course, during the House debate. I agree. I don't think that the actions they believe President Trump took amount to an impeachable offense. They may have been inadvisable, they may have been inappropriate, but they certainly don't reach the heights of high crimes and misdemeanors.
So let's talk specifically about why I came to that conclusion. They opened their trial brief by saying, the strongest thing, the president interfered with a foreign government to encourage their interference in an election. And everything after that is in defense of that statement. They're talking about the 2020 election. Do you agree with me that they're talking about the 2020 election?
Well, it's actually kind of funny, because sometimes I think all of this has to do with the 2016 election, and the Democrats' inability to not only get over that election, but also their disappointment at Robert Mueller's findings that there was no conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. So while I think the briefs are dealing with the 2020 election, all of this, the background, remains the 2016.
Well, I think you're exactly right, but I think that the Democrats have purposely conflated, and I mean intentionally and purposely, in every appearance and in their brief, 2016 and 2020, because it's legitimate for the president, based on the Politico investigation of January 11th, 2017, to worry about what Ukraine did to our election. It's legitimate for a president of the United States to worry about whether or not Ukraine was rooting for Hillary and trying to get her elected. That's legit. It's not legit to say, Ukraine, help me beat Joe Biden. So they conflate the two. But here's the interesting part, Matt. When you go to the statement of material facts, I'm going to lawyer geek out on you here. If you go to paragraph 73 of the statement of material facts, they cite a text from Volker, Ambassador Volker, who everyone agrees is the smart guy in the room on all this stuff, to Yarmuk, who is Zelensky's right arm, saying, if the Zelensky will promise to investigate 2016, he'll get his meeting. I don't know why the Democrats included that. It's contrary to their whole theory that it's all about 2020, but it does seem to me to be anything and everything that a Republican needs to dismiss.
Right. I mean, all of this goes to President Trump's state of mind. If he was interested in what happened in 2016, that seems to me fully reasonable for the president to want to get to the bottom of what was happening here, especially at the upper levels of the FBI and the CIA. And that means, just as we've seen with the Durham investigation, that you're going to have to go to foreign countries since they were involved in the intelligence gathering. So I think more broadly, Hugh, once you get to the level of detail as your lawyer geek was citing, most Americans have simply tuned out. And I think that's another source of Democratic frustration, which is, again and again, they've tried to move the needle on impeachment with briefs like the ones they issued over the weekend, like this last-minute press conference that Schumer tried to hold yesterday in the middle of the NFC Championship game. I don't know how many people were paying attention to that.
Nobody.
They failed to move the needle. And so I think that's what Republicans are really going to say. At the end of the day, the Republican senators are going to say, look, we are 10 months now away from an election. Let the people decide. The Democrats have failed to make their case.
Now, do you believe that they're going to get there without witnesses? Because one of my sources in the Senate says it looks like Senators Romney and Collins are committed to witnesses. I just think they're too smart for that. Mitt Romney's a lawyer. He didn't practice. Susan Collins on the Kavanaugh hearing got every lawyer in Maine to come down and brief her, plus some con law experts. They both are very, very smart. I think they will see that this will hurt the presidency.
Yeah, I thought Senator Collins' statement was very interesting. It seemed to suggest she would want to call for witnesses, but it also allowed her some room, depending on what they hear in the coming week. I think the Kavanaugh parallel is important for a variety of reasons. One is we're seeing the same Democratic media strategy that they used during Kavanaugh, which is at critical moments just kind of flood the zone with negative information, negative headlines. And the Parnas document dump on the day that the articles were transmitted was an example of that. I wouldn't be surprised if we have more just kind of salacious material and kind of high voltage headlines right before they take the first votes for witnesses, which should come after the managers make their opening arguments. But what the Democrats forget, Hugh, is that the way in which the Kavanaugh scandal played out actually caused Republicans to rally together, right?
Yes.
Republicans had this reaction to the unfairness and kind of the cynicism of the Democratic media game, where you just kind of smear people with these charges, the allegations that were count, not actually the facts. And so that actually led to Susan Collins voting for Kavanaugh. So I do think things are very much in play. Let's not also forget, the Democrats need 4 Republicans to side with them to call witnesses. So let's say, hypothetically, you have Collins, you have Romney, you have Murkowski. Well, you still need another one. And I think that's a pretty high bar for Chuck Schumer.
And I don't know that they've lost Manchin and Doug Jones yet. I really don't.
Right. Yeah.
I do believe that they are playing with fire here, and that they are going, they just like Kavanaugh, they did not understand. The American people are smarter than they think. Let me turn to the primary. Matt, I got burned yesterday by Elizabeth Warren supporters because I announced, matter-of-factly, when I was asked by Chuck, I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders this week because Virginia allows absentee early voting in person, and I don't know where I'm going to be on March 3rd. So I'm going to go down in the open primary and vote for Bernie. Because it's not strategic voting, because if I was doing that, I'd vote for Elizabeth Warren. We can beat her like a Bobo doll. I mean, really, I think Donald Trump can beat Elizabeth Warren in all 3 of the key states tomorrow and every day until November, because she wants to take away union health care. So I'm going to go vote for Bernie Sanders. So that was one endorsement. But last night, the New York Times did their big reveal. And 7 hours ago, they revealed they are endorsing both Klobuchar and Warren, which is an endorsement. It's a stunt to get clicks. What did you think of it?
Well, yeah, and eyeballs, too, because they have a show on the FX channel where I think they debuted this dual endorsement, which is a first. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of a newspaper endorsing 2 candidates in the same contest. The New York Times is pretty funny. My favorite line that jumped out at me from the endorsement is where they called Senator Warren a gifted storyteller. Yeah, they meant it as a compliment.
I missed that.
That's not the way that I read it. So, it was nice for Klobuchar, who, is a very impressive senator, but I don't think has any chance in the primary. And Warren, it's fascinating to see that Warren kind of comes down as the more establishment choice in the kind of, socialist, let's remake capitalism lane. And so the New York Times couldn't quite bring itself to embrace Bernie, but they still wanted the leftmost candidate. I thought that was revealing. You're right, though. Warren probably would be an easier opponent for Trump. But, Hugh, it is risky to embrace Bernie, because I know a lot of Democrats did that with Trump in 2016, and look what happened.
Yeah, but I'm not doing it strategically. Right. Trump has to win. I'm doing it because I would like to have America presented with a very clear choice between free markets and socialism. And Bernie does have energy at the grassroots, which is astonishing. It's like Donald Trump's energy with his people. He's got dedicated young people who will knock on doors like Howard Dean did. But he's the real deal. He wants to spend $30 billion on the green plan, the new Green Deal, not $10 billion or $5 billion or whatever billion that Elizabeth Warren wants. He wants to redistribute income. He's the real deal, Matt. I'd love to see a real deal socialist up against free market Donald.
And I think that's a contest the Trump campaign believes they can win as well. Starting last year, President Trump has often used that line on the stump where he says America will never be a socialist country. Socialism continues to be much less popular than capitalism overall in the American mind. So I think the Trump campaign would feel confident. Though, like I say, there's this risk factor with Bernie. And Bernie is a man of his convictions. Unfortunately, those convictions, haven't changed since the collapse of the Soviet Union.
No, they haven't.
1991. I just wish Bernie could kind of read a history text.
No, he's got a thaw out. So here's the question to wrap up, Matt, and I hope you keep coming back throughout 2020. As we get closer to November, do you think we'll be talking about the impeachment at all?
Oh, no, not at all. Unless, Hugh, and this is something I allude to in my latest column that I saw you tweeted out, they do it again. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more activity, maybe not leading to a second impeachment vote this year, but certainly if President Trump is reelected, which is, better than 50-50 in my book, I think he would be the first president to be impeached more than once, just because the Democrats have no other way to respond to President Trump except to investigate, condemn, and criminalize politics.
Well, let me revise and extend my question remarks then. If that becomes a widespread fear, doesn't that incline Republicans to a quick dismissal of these charges in order to set a precedent to discourage this House and this Democratic majority from being reckless again?
Yes, I think if you vote to call witnesses to extend this investigation into the Senate trial, to conflate the two, then you're legitimizing the process that brought us here. And I think that will be a powerful argument that Leader McConnell will make to his conference, and could very well be why the trial will end before the State of the Union.
Matthew Continetti from the Free Beacon, thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on. Go follow Continetti on, and it sounds just, it's going to be hard for the Steelers fans to spell that, but Continetti. There are two T's at the end. Continetti. Did I get that right? Probably not. Continetti. You'll find him, and you ought to be reading him every single day. Very quickly, Donald Trump last night saying about rural broadband, cut number 20. Oh, that clip stalled. Never mind then. ReliefFactor.com time. Look, have we restored the feed to my studio yet? In the process. I don't know if you can see this yet. We got the new machine back. The machine broke about 6 weeks ago. Dwayne dropped it, and he broke it. And now they got a new one. And so now I can show you again ReliefFactor.com, which I take in the first hour and remind you in hours 2 and 3. Don't leave home without it. I'm also going to be telling you about Honor Bound Coffee in the weeks and months ahead, because Relief Factor has started that to serve military families. But ReliefFactor.com is what I tell you about now. And I tell you about 3 times a day, because ReliefFactor.com absolutely provides support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come with the dreaded commute. Now, some of you do not have to go and commute today. It's Martin Luther King Day, so some of you are not commuting, but a lot of you are. It's a genuinely diverse reaction to Martin Luther King. I always like to come to work and play the I Have a Dream speech. That's how I celebrate Martin Luther King. I like to work today and let people hear that and make sure it's done the right way. But whether you're commuting or not, don't forget your ReliefFactor.com. All right? I carry Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. And by the way, go to HonorBoundCoffee.com. Support military families with 100% of the profits of your coffee habit. HonorBoundCoffee.com. All one word, HonorBoundCoffee.com. Go and get started, and I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by joined now also by Robert Costa of the Washington Post, and he is, of course, the host of Washington Week in Review. Good Martin Luther King Day to you, Robert Costa. Great to have you with me.
Great to be with you.
Two issues, impeachment and primaries. Let's do impeachment first. I've read the House trial brief. I've read their statement of material facts. I don't think they get over the de minimis standard of an impeachable offense. I think it should be dismissed. What is your reporting on whether or not there will be an option to dismiss in the rules?
There will likely be an option to dismiss in the rules, but McConnell is going to likely wait until after the arguments are made to have any kind of final agreement about whether they move to dismiss this or not, because you're going to have moderate senators who still want to have a discussion at the end of arguments about possible witnesses.
I agree with that entirely, and I don't believe that issue is over. The managers could make a better argument. But, Robert, I asked Matthew Continetti this, and having read through the entire brief and all, it took forever to get through this stuff. It appears to me the Democrats are conflating the 2016 election and the 2020 election. They want people to think Donald Trump was trying to influence the 2020 election. My view of the record that they submitted is that he was interested in the 2016 election. Is my assessment of the Democratic purpose correct in your view?
Your assessment is going to have to be determined by the facts of this trial. Very few people can actually get to the president's intent because so much of the discussion has been behind the closed doors, often classified about what the president actually said in terms of wanting to get this on behalf of his reelection campaign. For now, the Democrats essentially are resting their case upon the testimony of officials and that release of the transcript by the White House.
Do you know, Robert, if you go to the statement of material facts, I would refer you to paragraph 73, wherein the Democrats cite a text from Ambassador Volker to Zelensky aide Yarmuk, saying if the new Ukrainian president promises to investigate 2016, we're all good. It was the craziest thing for them to include. It proves that it was about 2016. So I think the Collins and the Romneys and the Murkowskis of the world are going to hear time to dismiss this. And I don't know that any of them have made up their mind yet. Do you?
I do not think they have made up their mind. They're watching this carefully. I do know that when it comes to whether it was 2020 or 2016, there's a question about whether investigating 2016 was a political weapon for 2020. The president was looking to have that as a tool against possible nominee Joe Biden. And so when you talk to more moderate Republicans who don't want to just dismiss this, they want to hear more about the president's intent. But it's going to be a tough case for the Democrats to prove, based on my own conversations with Democrats, because they say abuse of power can be argued in a lot of ways. What is the threshold for impeachment when it comes to abuse of power? It's constitutionally arguable.
It is, and I don't think they've met it under any understanding of what Hamilton wrote about in the Federalist. Let me turn to the primary. Yesterday on Meet the Press, I told people, Chuck asked me, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders this week because Virginia allows early absentee voting. I don't know where I'm going to be on March 3rd. And it's an open primary, so I can vote for a Democrat. I'm going to vote for Bernie so we get a clear choice between a socialist and a free market guy. Do you believe that a lot of Republicans will vote in Democratic primaries, Robert Costa?
I do not believe that. I think you're someone who's a troublemaker.
No, maybe. I'm not.
We'll leave that up to others to decide. But I think, look, I spent a week with Sanders in Iowa in recent days, and this is a real campaign, Sanders. I'm not so sure he needs the Hugh Hewitt vote in Virginia at this point. I mean, he is really battling Warren, trying to consolidate the left. He is, in many eyes of Democratic voters, a change agent, someone who's outside of the system. In a way, he reminds me of President Trump's own campaign in 2016.
This is why I want him to be the nominee. Clarity of choice. He's the real deal, authentic socialist. If I were doing strategic voting, I'd vote for Elizabeth Warren because Donald Trump would beat her like a Bobo doll. She wants to take away union health plans. Bernie does not. He's left an exception in his Medicare for All plan. In terms of energy and enthusiasm level, you've covered a lot of Iowa campaigns. How does Bernie's match up with Howard Dean's, with John Kerry's, with everyone who's been there and done that before?
Bernie's running a real campaign. He's learned lessons from 2016. This is a different campaign than what I covered then. This is a candidate who now doesn't talk about his ideology being a democratic socialist as much. He doesn't use the word revolution as much. This is someone who now leads with rage over health care costs. And that has been a powerful message to a Democratic base that is very frustrated with health care and has grievance against the establishment.
Now, in terms of whether or not the New York Times endorsement, which isn't an endorsement because they named two people, Klobuchar and Warren, does that make a lick of difference in Iowa or New Hampshire?
May help Senator Klobuchar a little bit. I'm not so sure a Bernie Sanders voter is going to be convinced to now go with Warren because she got a watered-down endorsement, a co-endorsement from the New York Times. But Klobuchar, she's been hovering around 6, 7, 8%. This brings her up to 10%. This could help her in her own race against Buttigieg for that more moderate vote in the race to be the counter to Biden.
Very well put. Robert Costa, follow him at Costa Reports. Follow him at The Washington Post. Watch Washington Weekend Review on Friday evenings and come back for hour number 3 of this Martin Luther King Day edition of The Hugh Hewitt Show.
I can't say I've read every word, but I've read a lot of it, yes.
Okay, so I've read through it, and I think there's a fatal flaw in it. Can you say whether or not they're arguing the president interfered with the 2020 election or with the 2016 election?
I think at different points they're arguing both. I mean, the basic gist of the House case is that both the president was part of an effort to interfere with the 2016 election and would be and has been conducting a kind of pattern of conduct that threatens the 2020 election as well. That's part of what they argue in the brief, which is a little bit surprising. They do raise kind of the Mueller investigation and the Mueller kind of the whole Mueller inquiry a little bit more than I think folks would have expected, given that the Mueller information is not part of the actual articles of impeachment, but in the brief they do talk about it.
What I think we see there is the intentional conflation of 2016 and 2020. I believe most of the public believes that the Democrats are arguing that the president was attempting to hurt Joe Biden in anticipation of his being the nominee in 2020. Yet the evidence that they provide in their statement of material facts, and I would direct you to paragraph 73, Michael, when you have a chance. I think it's the crucial paragraph in both documents. They cite Ambassador Volker texting Yarmuk, who is the Zelensky aide, national security aide, saying, if Zelensky agrees to an investigation into what happened in 2016, the meeting will happen. It is, to me, the dispositive fact, and it's put forward by the Democrats, so it has additional weight. I was thinking we were inevitably going to have witnesses until I read this. I was up late Saturday because I didn't meet the press yesterday. Right. I don't believe they stated a case. I think they lost Romney and Collins over the weekend.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think, part of this is that the decisions that folks like Collins and Romney are going to make are partly going to be based on facts like the ones you cite, but it's also going to be based on their political considerations. And I don't know that, that is as dispositive as you think. I do think, though, that the question of which election they've been talking about, the Democrats have been talking about, I think really the answer is both. That is, that's the maybe in part the difficult thing that the Democrats have to do is to kind of navigate the fact that their case involves both elections.
Well, conflating of charges is a common tactic among weak prosecutors. And what they do not spell out, they never use 2020, 2016. They don't want to. They want this to be a miasma, a fog of charge and allegation, and they want to get to politically damaging witnesses, though they know they will never win. I go to Romney and Collins because my reporting from friends in the Senate is that they are the two likeliest to want witnesses. I go to them because I think they're both very smart and very fair. I know Senator Romney pretty well. I've met Senator Collins a few times. She, according to Ruth Marcus in the book about the Kavanaugh confirmation, out-lawyered everyone, even though she's not a lawyer. She basically dragged in every lawyer from Maine and everyone in D.C. to talk to her about that. If she does this again, this is going to fall apart.
Well, we'll see. I mean, you may be right. Look, I think a lot is going to hang on the presentations that both sides make in this first phase. If you go back to Peter Baker's great book about the Clinton impeachment trial, one of the things that is clear is that the presentations that the House managers and the White House team made really made a difference for the senators. And there's reporting that showed that some of the presentations left the senators practically falling asleep because they were so sort of boring and not well put together. Other times, Asa Hutchinson, for example, and Lindsey Graham made very powerful presentations that really kept the senators' attention. And so I think, sometimes we talk about legal briefs and written documents and the like. I think a lot of times the actual presentations matter.
Now, okay, let's skip over to politics for a moment. The New York Times last night had a big reveal. Your paper had a big reveal. They endorsed, but they didn't. They endorsed two people, which isn't an endorsement. Bill Kristol just put breaking. Bulwark Online has endorsed the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers to win the Super Bowl, which is pretty funny. I don't want you can't slag on your colleagues there, but were you surprised? I know you're on the news side. Were you surprised by their editorial board's choice not to choose?
Yeah, well, so first of all, 100% full disclosure. I had no idea this was even coming. I opened the newspaper this morning, the news side generally has nothing to do with it, and I particularly had no knowledge of it. But look, I think it was an interesting choice. It in some ways does duck the question, right? It isn't a choice. On the other hand, I think the way they cast it was that they were making two choices, right? They were making one choice among what is generally considered the left side of the Democratic Party, that sort of wing of the party that's more the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren wing, and one choice among the more moderate side of the Democratic Party, the Buttigieg, Biden, Klobuchar wing. And so I think, it's an interesting choice. You're basically saying, here's the two people that we think the voters should choose among, and we'll see what happens.
Now, Michael Scheer, yesterday on Meet the Press, Chuck asked me, and so I told him I thought the winners of the Bernie Warren dust-up was Pete Buttigieg, because if you're going to leave one of those two because of that, you're not going to go to the other one, and you're not going to go to Joe Biden. You're going to go left. You're going to go to Pete. But I also announced absentee early voting is open in person in Virginia, so I get to vote this week because I don't know where NBC or Salem's going to have me on 3-3, so I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders. And, of course, the Elizabeth Warren people weren't happy with me. If I was strategically voting, I'd vote for her because I think she's the easiest to beat. But I want an authentic choice between a socialist and a free market guy. Do you think a lot of Republicans like me are going to vote in open primaries?
Maybe. I mean, I live in Virginia, so I certainly, I kind of understand that kind of voting. That as I've covered politics here for more than 2 people do that. I remember a primary between Oliver North and I'm forgetting Oliver North and a more moderate mainstream Republican, and a lot of Democrats voted in that, and somebody on your radio show will call in to remind me, no doubt, who that was. In any event, it was, that kind of thing happens a lot. I suppose it could happen, although I think history suggests that that kind of voting makes a difference only really usually on the margins. It doesn't really affect the primary, the sort of the main part of the election. And it was John Warner.
Yeah, that's it. You know why I think it's different this year, Michael, is because Trump is preordained. There's no enthusiasm. There's nothing interesting on the Republican side. There are a lot of open primaries. And because the Democrat rule set of proportionate voting on the first round actually values every vote far more than they were ever valued before. Purely economic terms, your vote means a lot more when everything is proportional above 15%.
Yeah, I suppose that's right. And we are in a political time, too, with over the last several years of President Trump, where the normal rules don't necessarily apply. And we've seen that over and over again. And so it's conceivable that that kind of strategic voting could make a big difference.
Last quick question. Your colleague, Nick Kristof, and Cheryl Woodun, his spouse, have written this amazing book, Tightrope. It's a gut punch. I read it in 2 days. It's an absolute gut punch on white working class America. It's why Trump won. It's like sitting in front of you. All their policy prescriptions are at least debatable, and many of them are wrong, but their reporting is Have you had a chance to read this yet?
I haven't read it yet, but I saw that you mentioned it yesterday on Meet the Press, and I made a mental note to go get it because it sounds like an amazing book.
Well, it explains despair in America and disgust with the political system in a way that J.D. Vance did 4 years ago, but this is from New York Times liberal columnists, right? That makes it different, doesn't it?
Well, look, I think it's been. I think you know, the senior management at the time has for several years now acknowledged that one of the things that we and others missed during the 2016 election was the kind of general political milieu around the white working class voter and how Trump appealed to them. And so I think the book maybe helps to reinforce that idea.
Absolutely. It's so well done. I encourage everyone to go and get Nick Kristof, Cheryl Wadoon's book, Tightrope. Thank you, Michael Shear. Shear M on Twitter. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening on this cold day inside the Beltway. 24 degrees outside. Cold and clear all this week. On Martin Luther King Day, we played some of Dr. King's most famous speech, I Have a Dream speech. It's always inspiring. Have a wonderful holiday. Markets are closed, though, and so my market report brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com is truncated. AndrewandTodd.com, though, is always open 24/7. If you go to the website, AndrewandTodd.com, answer a couple of questions, I'll be right back to you with the very best thing you can do with your biggest asset, which is your home. Should you refinance? Should you buy a second home? Should you become a co-borrowing, non-occupying borrower, meaning that you're going to help your son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter get into a home? I told you I've been reading the new book I finished, actually, yesterday, Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wadun, called Tightrope. And one of the most amazing chapters is liberals finally understand why we have a housing shortage in the United States. And it's because we don't build enough houses because of regulation. Now, it's just like a breakthrough chapter for me. But it will also encourage you to help your kids get into a house. It's the key ingredient to wealth in America is owning a home. And AndrewandTodd.com, they are lenders. Remember, with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian are lenders. They actually have a bucket of money and they lend it to people. And they have lent it to thousands of you. And they're the best in the business. You can trust them. You can also call them at 888-888-1172. I've been to their office. I know everyone. They're very trustworthy, very good guys. Andrew and I were in a Bible study for like 20 years when I lived in California. I just know them. And you ought to call them today. If you have a day off, it's a good day to call 888-888-1172 or visit AndrewandTodd.com. Now, we don't have any market activity today, but the Hong Kong market was down 1% overnight, 0.9%. I believe that is because of coronavirus and its spread into South Korea, into Beijing, into Shanghai. It's a mysterious illness. If it really gets going, it will. An already weak Chinese economy cannot have an epidemic like the Spanish flu of 1918 to 1920, the Great Flu. We cannot have that. Killed millions of people. And so I think the Chinese market is a little bit shaken by that. Gold, though, doesn't reflect panic. Gold is down a touch at $15.59 an ounce. The 10-year Treasury today is at 1.84, up a touch from last week. Still great lifetime rates. Head over to AndrewandTodd.com to take advantage of that. President Trump gave a speech to the Farm Bureau yesterday. Here's what he said, cut 18.
We have liberated American agriculture from an avalanche of federal regulations. In the Trump administration, we know that the role of government is not to harass our citizens. It is to serve our citizens, to make life easy, and to make you hire lots of people and have a great farm and have tremendous success, make lots of money, send your children to school, be safe, be free. Our law enforcement, we are going to protect our law enforcement just like they protect us. When I took office, I issued an order requiring that for every one new regulation, 2 old regulations must be eliminated. Instead of 2 for 1, we have now cut more than 8 for 1. Nobody thought that was possible.
Okay, and he went on to say cut number 19.
With your faith, your grit, your tenacity, your talent, and your patriotism, the best days for America and the best days for America's farmers and ranchers are yet to come. I want to thank everybody. This has been such an incredible turnout, and I appreciate everybody for being here. We're taking care of our farmers. We're taking care of our ranchers. We're taking care of our manufacturers. We're taking care of our military and our vets. We're taking care of our country. It's Make America Great Again. It's Keep America Great. It's whatever you want to call it. We're in the greatest country anywhere in the world, and we're taking care of you.
That is Donald Trump. By the way, according to the Farm Bureau, his popularity with American farmers is 83%, reflecting his deep grip on red states. The red states have gotten redder. The blue states have gotten bluer. And I think he's going to win, regardless of who gets the Democratic nomination. But I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders because I want the clearest choice possible between free markets and socialism. I'm going to vote for him this week because absentee early voting is allowed. I said that on Meet the Press yesterday. Boy, did the lefties get mad. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on Martin Luther King's birthday. I'm joined by Margaret Taleb, Chief White House Correspondent for Axios. You can read Axios.com and find everything that Margaret writes. Happy Martin Luther King Day to you, Margaret. Thank you for joining me on a holiday.
Thank you, Hugh. Same to you.
Two big issues, impeachment and Iowa. Let's start with impeachment. I have read the trial brief filed by the House managers and their statement of material facts. Have you had the chance yet to do that?
Yeah, sort of.
That's what most people tell me.
It's pretty long.
Lawyers tend to get geeky, and I was on Meet the Press yesterday, so I had to geek out and actually annotate it. Here's the basic problem I have with it, Margaret. I believe they conflate presidential interference in 2016 with presidential interference in 2020. Do you see the same problem?
I think that what's happening here with the two briefs, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going to take a much more of a big, broad strokes approach, is that the Democrats say that all of this is fair game for impeachment and that the White House is saying that almost none of this is fair game for impeachment. And that this is ultimately going to be up to two entities, John Roberts and the American voting public, to decide.
Now, what's interesting to me about that is go back and when you read it again, I think they purposefully conflate and do not distinguish between the president's intentions vis-a-vis 2016, which, when coupled with Politico's argument by Ken Vogel on January 11th, 2017, are not even an offense. They're perfectly appropriate. And their insinuation that he was attempting to encourage a foreign government to influence the 2020 election, which would be serious. I don't know if it would be. Go ahead.
Saying that you don't think you're saying that that there should not be any sort of a prelude, any sort of a we're saying this because XYZ pattern incorporated all in this. But do you feel like they make, if they're just taking a look at the incidents surrounding the Ukraine developments, do you think that that is not valid?
I don't think they make an argument that the president interfered with the 2020 election at all. I think they make an argument that his interest in 2016 was intended to influence the 2020 election, but they have no proof. And here's the key, Margaret, again, geeking out a little bit. In the statement of material facts, paragraph 73, the House managers, the prosecutors, the Democrats cite text from Ambassador Volker to President Zelensky's National Security Advisor, Yermak, that says, if the president agrees to investigate the 2016 election, you'll get the meeting. It's dispositive of what the president wanted, in my view. And it's nothing to do with 2020. The case collapses. I read that and I put it down. I said, my gosh, the case just collapsed. I think even Romney and Collins and Murkowski and Lamar Alexander, all of the Republicans who were on the edge about whether or not they needed witnesses, I think they're going to just walk away.
Yeah, I got to tell you, there will be an opportunity to vote on witnesses, but I don't see any evidence at this point that opportunity is going to get over the vote threshold. All of the early signals from that key group of Republican senators, at the very least, if that's what they intend to do, they're holding their cards back, at the very least.
And I believe after people read this, it's so underwhelming that it's such a dangerous precedent for the presidency. Governor Romney, Senator Romney, I've known for a long time, very principled man, as ethical as anyone I've ever met. Susan Collins, very principled, very smart. They're going to think about not November. They're going to be thinking about 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 100 years from now, and the threshold that they have to set. And boy, did they not get over this threshold. But Margaret, have you got any reporting on Doug Jones and Joe Manchin, who I don't believe will vote for this either?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I don't know what that side of the voting threshold looks like. One thing that we have been tracking over the weekend, Hugh, is this development on, if you're geeking out, on this other pivotal question, which is the motion to dismiss options. And I think when we see the rules, the resolution from McConnell, we'll know for sure. But our reporting over the weekend suggests that for all this discussion about how there's not an appetite for a motion to dismiss before the process proceeds, that may very well be baked into the White House's options.
This goes then to presentation. I believe there will be opening arguments, 12 hours for each side. and then there will be an opportunity to dismiss. That's what I think the rules are going to provide, or to go to witnesses, and the witness reciprocity is what I think they'll vote on if they get the witnesses. But this comes down to who's going to make the argument for the Republican side, the president. I would give it to Ken Starr. I would give it to, he's probably the most experienced Supreme Court litigator among the president's lawyers. He is comfortable having been a judge with Chief Justice Roberts, who served on the same circuit as Ken Starr did. He's an eloquent master of impeachment. I would just turn it over to him to make the argument to dismiss. Do you have any indication who's going to argue on behalf of the president?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason why Ken Starr is here in the mix is because while Pat Cipollone and Jay Sekulow are able to help the president with his guidance, the president and his core team did not see them as kind of folks who know this part of the process as well. Again, they've played it very close to the vest exactly how the process is going to unfold beginning later this week. But when it comes to that motion to dismiss, I'm not sure it's going to be just one time. Like, my understanding of the way these rules are going to unfold is that there can be a motion to dismiss multiple times throughout the process, and we may very well see that, whether it's Ken Starr driving that process or otherwise.
Okay, his prediction is that the Democrats will present for 12 hours, and the president's trial team will present for an hour or two, and then move for dismissal. That's my prediction. We'll see. Let's go to Iowa.
Okay.
The New York Times this morning had their big reveal, and it turns out they didn't endorse. They split decision. No, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren. That's not actually an endorsement. That's a differentiation of 2 from 7. What did you make of that choice, Margaret?
I'm not a media writer, so I'll just tell you I thought the ultimate effect is going to be that it's going to create a lot of discussion around things. But again, when you recommend 2 people, you're not recommending one person. And I think that it now becomes one of multiple factors that are going into Iowa. The practical effect is going to be, to some extent, a political lifeline, both for Klobuchar, who really needs it in Iowa to stay alive, and for Warren, who's been sliding vis-a-vis Sanders in recent weeks. But it gets thrown into the mix during this week when all of these other elements are developing. You've got the impeachment. You've got Sanders vowing to have a couple events in Iowa anyway. You've got Biden and Buttigieg trying to take advantage of the fact that all of these senators, including Warren and Klobuchar, that their primary obligation is to be part of the trial process in Washington. And so, practically speaking, I'm not sure how much it will affect things beyond another element of the conversation and the political lifeline for the 2. But it's interesting, and it's getting people talking. Beyond that, you can always ask how much endorsements matter, and when an endorsement actually becomes a recommendation of 2 completely different choices.
Yeah, Tim Alberta.
It's not really an endorsement.
our friend Tim Alberta just tweeted out, I mean, newspaper endorsements are silly and self-important to begin with, but this Times bit, good grief, have these people zero self-awareness? Bingo! Now, of course, I stand accused of zero self-awareness because on Meet the Press yesterday, I said, I'm taking advantage of the fact that Virginia is allowing open primary early voting absentee right now. And so I'm going to go in this week and vote for Bernie Sanders because I don't know where I'm going to be on March 3rd when it's Super Tuesday. I could be here. I could be I just don't know. So I have a right to use that. The laws of the Commonwealth allow me to vote. It's an open primary. I'm going to vote for Bernie to get. It's not a strategic vote, because if I wanted that, I'd vote for Elizabeth Warren. She's the easiest to beat. It's the clearest vote. It will present the starkest choice. First to my proposition, do you think that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump present the starkest choice?
Well, on policy-wise, often that's true, but style-wise, and in terms of their appeal, I actually think the 2 men appeal on a gut level in the same way to some voters, and they both have an ability to trigger kind of a populist spirit and engage people emotionally. So I think they're very different in terms of what they represent, in terms of what they represent policy-wise. But in terms of style, in some ways, they have some crossover appeal.
I agree 100% with that. In fact, I think they're very similar in style and in the energy that they bring and the grassroots that they excite. But on policy, because that would offset, you would have a clear choice for people in the middle. between socialism and free markets. I mean, Bernie is against the defense budget. Donald Trump wants to add billions to it. Bernie will appoint living Constitution enthusiasts. Donald Trump will continue to appoint originalists. It would be the clearest choice we've had since 1972, Margaret.
I'm going to take your word for it because I think you've studied this issue very closely, but I'll also say that if you took all of the Democratic candidates and put them up on a board against President Trump, from a policy perspective, I think there's a huge difference on so many levels that, Sanders probably from a tax perspective, at least is an easy place to start. And from some of the language around the role of government in society, it may be the starkest, but only by shades. It's a pretty clear distinction between President Trump and almost any Democrat you could put on the board.
My but is Bernie will not try to hide that. He won't, quote, move to the center. None of that for Bernie Sanders.
Who do you think's hiding it the best? Of the
Pete Buttigieg is hiding it the best. Pete's a radical. He's a fun, smart, very charismatic radical, but he's just as radical as Bernie. Amy Klobuchar is hiding it pretty well. The guy who is actually a moderate is Mike Bloomberg, except on guns, right?
Well, certainly on guns, healthcare, climate change, and education, he's moved the ball in a further direction than most of his Democratic counterparts.
But I think he deserves center left. I think he actually is center left. He's not really campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire. So
on social policy, but on economic policy, I think we don't even completely know. I would have said I thought he was much more center, maybe occasionally center right on economic policy, but that may be changing also. I think we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting. I believe that he would not be a sucker for a regulatory initiative that came down the road. Every regulatory initiative that came down the road, I think he'd look really hard at it. Margaret, always a pleasure to talk with you. Happy Martin Luther King. I appreciate it today. I appreciate when people talk to me on holidays because I'm working. I want them to work as well. And thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that. Time for me to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. Some of you are commuting today. Some of you are not. Whether or not you're commuting, you ought to be taking your ReliefFactor.com. All right. I take it every morning, take it in the first hour, remind you about it in hours 2 and 3. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, omega-4 pills, easy to swallow, lukewarm coffee. Every single day I do it. Then I remind you for the rest of the day, take it yourself. I also want to tell you about honorboundcoffee.com, begun by Pete and Seth Talbot. Same guys. I want you to go get ReliefFactor.com because it works. But I want you to go and trust the father-son team, Pete and Seth Talbot, who have decided military families in America deserve more support. So if we can change America's coffee drinking habits to use Honor Bound coffee, which is premium coffee, just get your coffee sent to you at home. Just get it sent to you at home, and all of the profits from the coffee you drink will go to the Semper Fi Fund to begin with. That's the first charity they've agreed to work with. They're going to work with a lot of charities. But you know the Semper Fi Fund from my show. If you want to help them, go order honorboundcoffee.com today. Stop with your other brews, which are special. Some of you people, and if you're just a regular coffee drinker like me, any cup of coffee will do. Go to honorboundcoffee.com, but start with relieffactor.com. And then come back. Tim Alberta and I are both fans of teams that have never been to the Super Bowl, so we are particularly bitter about all the hype that now comes. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Yesterday, the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers advanced to the Super Bowl. Tim Alberta joins me. Tim, of course, is with Politico, and I'm, of course, with Salem and NBC, and neither of us have ever had the chance to cheer for a team in the Super Bowl. Tim, are you bittersweet this morning?
Hugh, I find myself wondering around this time every year, what would happen if both the Lions and the Browns made their first Super Bowl in the same year? Do you think that would be a sign of the apocalypse?
It would. The end times would not allow that game to go forward. But at this point, I believe the Browns are actually closer to that Super Bowl berth than the Lions are. Do you agree with me?
Probably only because your quarterback is 10 years younger and has a lot less mileage on him. And but I think both of our ownerships and front offices are a disaster, so they sort of wash each other out.
I'm counting on Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett. Let me go to what you just tweeted 14 minutes ago. I mean, newspaper endorsements are silly and self-important to begin with, but this Times bet, good grief, have these people zero self-awareness? I retweeted that because I think it's exactly correct about self-awareness. When I endorsed Bernie Sanders on Meet the Press yesterday, said I'm going to vote for him in the open primary this week because I can vote early in Virginia, I'm very aware that the left is mad at me and they don't care. But the New York Times appears to think their endorsement matters.
You know, every editorial board thinks their endorsement matters, Hugh, and obviously the New York Times, so they have a special sense of that self-importance I referenced. But, you know, the problem I have with newspaper endorsements in general is that, A, they don't really matter. They don't move votes. They are basically an exercise in these people on the editorial board sort of getting together and trying to project an influence that they don't really have. And B, I think it further contributes to a diminished firewall or perceived firewall between the editorial side of the newspaper and the reporting side of the newspaper. And that's really the problem I have, is when lots of people who are not experts in the nuances of journalism today, when they flip on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, and they catch wind of the New York Times endorsing these two Democratic candidates, for many of those people, they won't necessarily make the distinction, or they won't understand that there is a distinction between, you know, the liberal editorial board doing this and the dozens of Times reporters who are out there covering the national campaign. And I just think we have a major problem in American journalism with perceptions of bias and with real bias that does exist, and with a lack of differentiation between reporting and opinion. And I feel like this is right at the heart of it, and I wish they would just go away.
Well, it's built into Twitter. I have had this argument again and again and again. If you're an opinion journalist like I am, and you're a reporter, you have to declare every single day, I'm reporting that I have sources in the Senate that tell me that Romney and Collins are inclined towards witnesses, but it is my opinion that Bernie Sanders is the best nominee that the Democrats could put up for clarity's sake against Donald Trump. I can do that. I have enough time. When you tweet, and you tweet a political opinion, you're hurting your brand, or you're changing your brand, aren't you?
Yeah, look, no question. I think social media is the worst thing that ever happened to journalism in some ways. Obviously, it's an incredible tool for news gathering and for sort of understanding things that are happening in real time, sometimes across the world, and so that's an invaluable resource at times. But yeah, Hugh, I mean, look, the fact that every reporter now who's supposed to be a hard news beat reporter, the fact that everyone is on social media and feels the need to comment on everything that's happening, and oftentimes inject voice and opinion on that medium when they would never be allowed to do so in their actual work, in their copy, I think it's troubling. And
it's very troubling.
Look, you know, the genie's out of the bottle at this point, though, right? It's never going back in. And I think, to the point about the newspaper endorsement, it further erodes whatever firewall there once was, or was supposed to be, between, you know, news gathering operations and opinion.
Now, a quick question on impeachment. I don't know if you've read the trial brief yet or the statement of material facts. Have you had a chance yet to, Tim?
I have not read them in full.
Okay, I had to labor on them Saturday night because of being on Meet the Press on Sunday. They fail to state a threshold case of impeachment, and they conflate 2016 and 2020 completely. And their statement of material facts, paragraph 73, is an indictment of the allegation that their 2020 interference was involved. I just don't think this is going to get over the bar for witnesses. What's your reporting on the witness question?
So my reporting on the witness question is that at this point, as of I would say heading into the weekend, I haven't talked to anybody over the weekend here, but as of Friday evening, nobody really knew. This is one of those very rare times in the Senate Republican caucus where even McConnell does not really have his ducks in a row at this point. It's not to say that he won't, and it's not to say that he's going to face some sort of a jailbreak. I think that's unlikely. But I think there is real uncertainty because of a couple of the members that you mentioned, and also some others. There is not sort of a uniform view of these proceedings, at least not yet, and it could fall into line in the next 36 hours here very easily. But as of right now, I think a lot of people are still sort of holding their breath and looking around to see who's jumping.
And I will make a prediction, Tim. When they read these briefs and statement of material facts, the very serious, very smart, very considerate members like Romney and Collins who are on the fence, they're going to say we can't approve this for the sake of the presidency in the future. We have to dismiss this, but only after arguments. Tim Alberta on Twitter at Tim Alberta. Go Lions, go Browns. We shall meet next year in the next year's Super Bowl. Don't go anywhere, America, except here tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Ben.